Yo, what is good, everybody? It's your boy Golden Falls, Golden whatever you want to call me, and I'm back with part 3 of What If Deku had a clone Quirk. And I'm sorry about missing another day. Normally, I kind of just wanted to miss that one day, the like Sunday, because it's kind of like a family day and stuff. But I just had a really bad headache yesterday, and it was almost impossible for me to record. So I just kind of took the day off and did what I had to do. But yeah, I'm here now. It's all good, and I'm not gonna waste that much more of your time. And we're just gonna get into part 3 of What If Deku had a clone Quirk. Let's get it. Izuku Midoriya and the rest of his class arrive, well, in class. They begin waiting to hear what Aizawa has to say, eventually leading to Aizawa explaining exactly what's going to happen that said day, and that is the UA Sports Festival. The UA Sports Festival is a way for them to show off exactly what they've been through, what they can do, and so on and so forth. Izuku wants to show exactly what he could do. He hasn't really perfected much of anything, and that little bit of usage that he did a lot or during the USJ, he won't be able to pull that out right now. But utilizing his quirk and utilizing his clones, he'll be just fine in some of these USJ or this UA events. Izuku would arrive with his class as a cheering crowd would welcome them, and he would listen to the crowd and kind of get lost in it. His class would wait for a while until everybody else arrives as well, including the general studies, business, support, and so on. Izuku would see that Midnight would be hosting the UA Sports Festival and eventually would call up Katsuki Bakugo, the person who got number 1 in the entrance exam. Bakugo would walk up to the stage and begin to call out to everybody and would begin to say that he's going to win. And that's really it. Everyone's kind of shocked and kind of disappointed. There's no humbleness in Bakugo, so the people there aren't too happy with the way he responds, but still, he is the number 1 student in the entrance exam. With that said though, the first event would be announced to be the obstacle course race, and when this is announced, Izuku smiles widely, because this should be easy enough. He has something that he can get a far lead with immediately in terms of his quirk, and he'll be able to sprint ahead almost instantaneously. So when everyone lines up and gets ready, Izuku immediately clones himself into his, well, energetic version or his very fast version, and he immediately basically hops on his back, and they sprint off at insane speeds when it's called that they're allowed to move. Izuku sprints through the corridor using his energetic version of himself, and they immediately are ahead by a large margin. Not many people even close to keeping up, Izuku being faster than practically everyone there at this moment, or at least his quirk being faster. So he races ahead of everyone, blasting through the competition, and immediately would arrive at the giant robots that actually he hasn't seen at all. Now, this isn't too big of a threat. He can just kind of slide under the robot's legs and kind of avoid them here and there. And honestly, he kind of runs around them to kind of get them tangled up so they begin to fall. And when they do, it actually does slow down everyone behind him once again. A bunch of the people that are very, very strong that are behind him actually realize that the gap that he's making, Izuku is making at this moment, is pretty substantial. So they need to hurry up. So Bakugo and Todoroki begin to put pedal to the metal, using their quirks to try and keep up to the best of their abilities. Of course, Izuku's speed is only temporary in technicality, because he's gonna eventually wear out and not be able to use his clone. But the thing is he had a lot of training with utilizing this clone, so it's not gonna disappear how it once did, and maintaining a relatively basic speed will allow him to conserve energy for the upcoming battles as well. So when he gets to the type ropes, it's relatively easy to actually just run across the ropes using his energetic version of himself, because frankly the speed itself would allow him to not really have to worry about the ropes and kind of just be able to clear the gaps. So he does that relatively quickly, and eventually he would arrive at the minefield. And now this is where the issue kind of lies. And this issue would be that he doesn't want to just sprint through this because it could become definitely detrimental. So he decides he's going to try something else. Try something that he actually hasn't done since the USJ. He's going to use his different version of himself, a version of himself that is based on a sad or kind of sad emotion, and it would allow him to kind of sense where everything is, being that this version of himself is a psychic type quirk. And let's just say it won't last very long, so Izuku has to utilize what he can tell from his clone as best as he possibly can. When he clones himself into this sad version of himself, it does take a moment to get the words out of him because, I mean, obviously the emotions have an effect on what Izuku does, but the psychic version of himself clears a perfect pathway for Izuku, and he just casually runs through that pathway, eventually leading to about, I would say, 95% through the minefield. That clone would disappear, and Izuku would kind of sigh and be kind of annoyed because he's not able to hold or withhold that version of himself for very long without draining a stupid amount of stamina, because frankly he just doesn't know how to utilize it properly at the moment. So he clears the rest of the minefield on his own, but he does step on a mine or two, which unfortunately kind of sends him flying, you know, to the side or whatever. But luckily enough, he's fine, and he makes it all the way through, and he'd finish the obstacle course race as not only first, but he would just jog the rest of the way through because of the advantage he had over everybody and how far ahead he truly was. Now, of course, Bakugo and Todoroki would make their efforts to try their best to catch up, but catching up really wasn't an option after a certain point, so Izuku would be number one. Now, there are some disadvantages for being number one, and that would be revealed with the next event, and that's the Cavalry battle. Midnight would announce that the Cavalry battle involves a group of students, and more like maybe 4 students, and more or less they would basically act as a horse in a way. The one student would be on top, and there would be headbands. All the students would have headbands. But here's the instance, or here's the problem with that, is that the person who gets first is actually the person that will have a 1 million point headband. Now, it doesn't matter if you have this headband at the very end of the game, or if you have it in general, because whoever does have it would just auto win. Because there's no real reason to even attack this person, quote unquote, if you just allow them to keep the headband and they automatically win, or at least get first place. You could easily rack up points from other students and win relatively easily. But at the same time, many of these students are extremely competitive, including people like Bakugo and Todoroki, so having the 1 or 10 million point headband would put a massive target on your back, and Izuku would find that out relatively quickly. He would build a decent team of Tokiyami and some other people, actually including Mei Hatsume as well, because he's heard about her genius, more or less, inventions from Melissa throughout this time. So he would build a pretty good team, and with his clones and the allowance of a quirk, technically this isn't him touching the ground. So it's as if he has more bodyguards. He makes the angry version of himself basically bodyguard them throughout this time, and it's relatively easy to fend off anybody because, well, Izuku has full control over his clone that's on the ground with no responsibilities, so he's able to fend off everybody relatively easily, including if he needs a little bit of a speed boost, he summons or he clones his speed version of himself, or the energetic version of himself, that could get him out of harm's way relatively quickly. Defense is something that they were perfect at, and defense is something that they had a good time doing, because they would keep their 10 million point headband or 1 million point headband, and they would be first in the cavalry battle as well, in which it was pretty easy. I don't really need to get into any complicated details on the reason why. All quirks are allowed, so the fact that he has a clone quirk is very convenient for this especially. And it'll be very convenient for the next battle as well, being that of the 1 versus 1 battles, or just, 1v1s. in which there's a little bit of an issue with that 1v1 type of tournaments, and that's because the first person he'll go against is Shinso, and Shinso's quirk is relatively unknown to Izuku and unknown to many others, but he does get a little bit of a hint from one of his classmates about what Shinso's quirk kind of does. And that's when he talked or answered a question, it seemed that he got put in a trance, as if he could no longer control his movements and no longer could control anything. In which Izuku takes this information to heart because he doesn't want to just throw away his chance at winning, especially with just how Shinso's quirk works, and also how the information he just got. So when it's his turn and Midnight calls up Shinso and Izuku Midoriya, well, he's ready for whatever's to come, and he kind of feels bad though. In a way, he really does. He summons or he clones his energetic version of himself, and he thinks about just immediately eliminating Shinso. Shinso begins to talk and basically saying this or that, or basically in a way complimenting Izuku, asking him how it feels to have such an amazing quirk, and Izuku shakes his head. His energetic version of himself charges forward at Shinso and, well, grabs onto him and is about to push him off, but out of nowhere, the energetic version of him just declones, disappears, and Izuku begins to stand still, in which Shinso is confused, very confused. What is happening? Hey, you alright? Shinso would ask Izuku, and this time it's not even because he's trying to put him in a trance, he's genuinely confused. Izuku shakes his head, and he begins to think, this guy right here, he's gone through not only the obstacle course race, but also the cavalry battle, getting to this point as a general studies student, and he didn't even get a chance, not even one chance, to become a hero, or at least be in the hero class. Izuku feels kind of bad for him, especially with Izuku's eyes opening to the fact that he's kind of been blessed. Frankly, he's been extremely lucky on all fields of imagination. He's been trained by All Might. He's training with All Might's successor. Yeah, he doesn't know that Melissa technically, has One for All, because, he didn't really think that far ahead, but he can make his own assumptions. But on top of that, he's had such a blessing throughout this time. His quirk itself is in a way a blessing. Shinso got the short end of the stick. His quirk is amazing, great. It may seem villainous to some, but it's a fantastic quirk. But just because of the way UA is set up, he wasn't able to even get in. He wasn't able to do anything. He can't get into the hero school, so he went to the general studies to try to beat someone out. Izuku low-key kind of feels bad. He doesn't want to throw away this chance, or basically throw away this chance for himself, but also doesn't want to throw away the chance for Shinso. So Izuku decides to answer a question, in which Shinso's confused. It seems like he answers the most simple question. He tells Shinso that he's fine. He's just fine. And as he does this, Shinso activates his quirk, and he doesn't even smile. He's confused. It was obvious that Izuku knew what his quirk worked, or how it worked, and everyone in the stands are confused as well. Why did he do that? Or at least Class 1A is confused because he knew how his quirk worked. Izuku would eventually be told to walk off the stage, in which he does. And Izuku Midoriya loses in the first round of the 1 vs. 1s. And after the fact, Shinso walks over to him and asks why he would do something like that. That he didn't want his pity, and he wanted to just win. Izuku shakes his head and says that he's been blessed throughout this entire time. He's correct. With his quirk, with everything that he's done so far, with the training, the people that have trained him. So it's time that someone else gets the chance as well, especially with a quirk like his. Izuku nods towards Shinso, telling him that he has a chance to be just as good, if not better, than everyone here as a hero. And he hopes that he can take that chance, and hopefully he can get by, with trying to beat some of these other people. But it's going to have to be more than just using his quirk. He's going to have to get real creative. Izuku walks away and kind of waves him off. But of course, not the entirety of Class 1A, actually know about Shinso's quirk. It was basically just a couple of people. They only told Izuku because that was his next up fight, so who says that Todoroki would actually know coming in? And maybe, just maybe, Todoroki would still beat Shinso, but the fact that he was able to take down someone recommended by All Might would get a lot of eyes. On top of that would get the eyes of Aizawa wanting to train him far immediately at that, and on top of that, other schools and other agencies or internships are basically paying attention to Shinso now. So when he goes in to fight Todoroki, he may get obliterated, and he might more or less lose instantly, but still, it's something that Shinso will benefit from in the near future. Todoroki, on the other hand, unfortunately will not use his fire, but when he would get to Bakugo and be egged on to use that said fire, and Izuku even from the stands is encouraging the use of it, it does implant in his brain that idea that maybe he should, or maybe he should try, because it is his quirk at the end of the day. But in this tournament, he wouldn't use it, but the idea of him using it would be within his brain. With the UA Sports Festival now wrapped up and everything to a close, Izuku goes and speaks with All Might and Melissa. All Might brings up the fact that it was pretty honorable of Izuku to do such a thing, even if it gave Shinso just a glimpse more of a chance to become the hero he wants to be. On top of that, Izuku really didn't need it. I mean, he has the recommendation of All Might. Many people know who he is now, and frankly, there's a lot of places he could go. But there is one place he would recommend, and the same thing he's recommended to Melissa, and that's going with Gran Torino. Since both of them have trained together and have seen their benefits go upwards and outwards, it's definitely a good idea for them to kind of stick together in a way. Melissa will be taking on an internship as well, same thing with Izuku. So if they both head to Gran Torino and they get some practice and some training in from one of All Might's old masters, then it should be definitely beneficial. All Might is saying this all while shaking like a literal scared person or a scared little kid sitting in the dark, which is definitely an odd thing to see a giant man like him do, but I guess it's scary to talk about your old master. I don't know, but nonetheless, Izuku and Melissa would agree on doing such a thing because, I mean, for one, they've had some really high progress in terms of their training together, and that will continue on as long as they continue to keep training together. So after a day would pass, a car would pick them up and bring them to Gran Torino's place, in which when they would open the door, he would act as if he's dead. Well, you know, with the whole ketchup on the ground thing. Izuku would immediately realize that's, yeah, the guy's not dead. He's just playing a role, in which it is kind of funny, but Izuku tells him to just get up and that they have work to do. And Gran Torino gets up and kind of smiles and says that he likes the kid. It seems like both of them seem to be really on their gears and on their grind when it comes to, well, involving training. That's what they want to do, and that's what they're going to do. And Gran Torino knows exactly about Izuku's quirk and how to get it better, so they're going to work on that with Melissa on top of it as well. Izuku and Melissa would begin their training, Izuku beginning to utilize his energetic form and also his anger form as much as possible, and trying to link it back to himself. Izuku has shown this in the USJ, and he wants to try and master that. If he can somehow get his energetic form within his own, or the energetic form's quirk within himself, it could become beneficial for his own preservation, especially because they don't want Izuku to be a liability and be attacked. So when he uses his energetic form, he tries to fully fill out his quirk entirely, get the way feel how the energetic form feels, how the speed quirk feels, and how his body changes with that energetic form. Izuku focuses hard on this and tries to continue to mold his body into different ways, and sees and tries to figure out if he can truly do that. And this would be a form of a form of his clone Quirk, a form of his clone Quirk, but it's more within his body, changing his body parts and his organs and everything to fit that said Quirk. Like I said before, his speed Quirk that he used at one time on accident hurt him extremely bad because his skin, his body, everything, his limbs were not based around that speed Quirk. So he's trying to basically limit himself, or basically change himself and clone those different versions of his body within himself so that he can maintain properly, in which is an extremely hard thing to do. We're talking about Izuku utilizing multiple Quirks here. We're talking about him using a clone Quirk, but on top of that using a speed Quirk on top of that. And it's something that he'll have to work on throughout this time immensely, but he does get some work in with it, and he's able to utilize the speed Quirk a little bit, and is able to use the strength Quirk separately, of course, a little bit as well. This does help with training, by far would help with training, because this would be basically more utilization for Izuku, and frankly, his clones aren't as adaptive as, well, himself. It might sound weird, but it is kind of like a different subconscious. So he's not able to react and basically act as quick as he would if it was his own Quirk or within his own body. So it does help a great deal. After some time of training, eventually Gran Torino would want them to get some time in the field. And in the field is something that's, well, he'll regret just a little bit. Because when they begin to take basically a trolley all the way there, immediately the trolley would be smashed into by a Nomu. Of course, Gran Torino was on top of it, kicking the Nomu in the face, sending it flying out, and he tells Melissa and Izuku to follow him in and to make sure that everyone here is safe first, and then meet him in Hosu City, because they need to be able to evacuate as many people as possible. That's what needs to be done, and with Izuku there, and with clones, he should be able to actually do that pretty quickly. Izuku helps everyone else as Melissa does the same, and as they sprint off into Hosu City to meet up with Gran Torino. Izuku would begin to use clones to help people escape and also defend people from Nomu attacks. These Nomus being far weaker, frankly, than the Nomu he even faced or saw initially in the beginning. But still, these Nomus still are pretty strong nonetheless, so he wants to keep his distance to the best of his ability. But during this time, Izuku would save a lot of people, but for some reason, he would get this bad feeling. His eyes would flash purple, and something around him was happening, and they would continue to flash purple more and more and more until he sees something. A flash of Tenya Ida in a nearby alleyway. He immediately, his eyes turn yellow and he sprints off as if it was just a flash of light. Melissa immediately races off to catch him because it has to be something bad. Something has to be happening for him to just leave without a word. Melissa goes soaring past, and Gran Torino asks what's going on, and Melissa waves to him as if she's asking for backup very soon and to follow their trail. Gran Torino, not knowing what's happening exactly, but knows that these kids are extremely intelligent and frankly extremely smart, that he needs to keep up and help out here and get to them as soon as possible. Because when Izuku arrives right before Melissa would, as she catches up a couple seconds later, Izuku would see someone in an alleyway and see Tenya Ida on the ground with a bloody body to the right. Hero named Native is basically on death's door, and Tenya Ida is about to have a sword plunged into his back. Izuku charges forward and kicks the hero killer off of Tenya, and he tells Tenya to basically get out of there as soon as possible, but Tenya says he can't move. Izuku makes a clone, and immediately his energetic form, as he drops out of it as well, because he can't hold, well, both. The clone of himself grabs Tenya and races him off to safety. Izuku just puts Tenya on a nearby street that he knows will be safe, and the hero killer begins to shake his head, saying that heroes, well, fake ones, need to die and need to be punished just like that one over there, a student that was coming for revenge. Izuku shakes his head, and Melissa stands next to him ready for a fight. She asks Izuku if he's really prepared for this, and that if he has enough stamina to withhold any clones or utilize quirks himself, in which Izuku says he'll be just fine. That their training will be put on full display as they take down the hero killer, Stain. But that is for the next part of What If Deku Had a Clone Quirk. And if you enjoyed part 3, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a sub, make sure to leave a comment down below, all that good stuff. And I hope y'all enjoyed, and I hope y'all continue to enjoy. I actually really enjoyed making this series so far. So yeah, show some love, and I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.